Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journals, and I am excited about today's podcast, which you can see on YouTube or listen to on any podcast platform. And we always deal with addiction and recovery. And my guest today is someone I've known and loved, in a generic sense of the word, for a very long time. And I call her a recovery superstar, which you are, Amy Daschle.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I've loved you for a long time and seen you grow and prosper and do great things. And it's just an honor to have you here. Maybe we should start with, you and I talked on the phone about coming and doing this podcast last night, and we were talking about how long ago. There's a picture, I don't know if people have access to it, but there's a picture somewhere on the internet of you with looking pretty rugged down on Rio Grande back in the heyday of all the crime and corruption that was going on around the road home shelter, which was the shelter at the time. And what we come up with 6 years ago?
6 years ago, yeah.
So 6 years ago, you were doing what?
I was doing the most. I was homeless. I fell into addiction in 2015. And it was from a stint of surgeries. You know, I've talked about my story multiple times before, but it started with prescription medication. Long story short, with a lot of trauma all at once, and I started self-medicating, right? I've been on opiates for a year and a half after the surgeries, and my mom committed suicide. I was going through a divorce. Ex-husband absconds with my kids out of state, and I broke. Started self-medicating, and the pills became just so expensive to sustain, to support my addiction, that first $10 bag of heroin came. And within 2 months, I was homeless. Wow. Literally homeless.
You lost everything.
Everything. I lost
your kids, your home, your husband.
My worth, everything. My mom. Yeah, I didn't know how to handle that emotional trauma all at once. It was, once my kids were taken, I had no reason to move forward. They were my everything. And here I have a dependency that I have created an addiction out of that I needed to sustain. I'm trying to keep a job. I'm going through withdrawals. And I just didn't know how to function without that medication.
Pretty bleak and dismal situation then.
Yeah.
And what finally turned things around? What clicked in your mind, or was it the cops or the terrible way you were living, or what?
So I was on the streets homeless for 2 years, wow. Right? And so from the pills turned into heroin to turned into IV use, and then to whatever you have. I was that type of an addict. What do you got? You don't know what it does, give it to me and I'll tell you what it does, right? Let me try it. And but heroin was my go-to always, and I would sit on that street corner, and it was just one Christmas would go, 2 Christmases would go. Whoa. And I was just a small-time little street dealer just to support my addiction. And what changed for me was I was in and out of jail. I got arrested 7 different times, into jail, do 3 months, get released back out into my addiction. 6 months before the 7th time that I was arrested, I was actually seeking help, right? It was the middle of winter. I had just had enough. I was up at the hospitals pleading with them to get into treatment, and this is before, all the access that we have nowadays, So 6 years ago, it was difficult to get into treatment. I was on a waiting list for the House of Hope for a year. And wow. I kept calling, trying to get in. I actively was seeking help, and I just kept getting turned away as just another worthless homeless addict, right? I was uninsured, I was unfunded, and I just wanted to die. I could remember sitting on that street just begging God to just take me because I couldn't do it anymore. And the moment that clicked for me was Operation Rio Grande. So 6 years ago, Utah got $67 million in federal money to address the homeless situation, right?
Which still exists. But
It
yes.
still exists.
Yeah.
But to my own blessing, I received an opportunity for treatment. So the week that they were doing the sweep is when they came and they arrested like 2,500 people
Right.
like within a week.
I was covering
span.
it as a news guy
Yeah,
at the time.
yeah.
There were just hundreds of cops just sweeping down the street.
Just clean us up, taking us to just jails across the Wasatch
Right.
Front, But this seventh time was different, they pulled us in a room and they had the LDAs, they had the assessment team, they had a whole team within the jails that I had never seen before. And they offered me treatment, and I jumped. But the moment that clicked for me before I went into jail that changed me, that made me accept treatment, that knew I had to fight, was they were doing the sweep. And for those that are not familiar, they brought in the trucks, right? They were arresting whatever you could not move, they would throw away. So everybody's belongings right then and there would be thrown away, right? So I always had a bike and a backpack, and I would be rolling down the street, and I was getting off because here's the cops. I don't want to get arrested,
Right.
And so I'm trying to get off the street, and there was a homeless vet who had his basket. For all of you, here's the real story, who had his basket and everything that he owned. He's disabled. He couldn't move it in time. They were getting ready to throw all of his stuff into the truck. So I grab his basket, and I turn to get off the street, and I hear click, and there's a Salt Lake Tribune reporter that takes my picture with this basket. So I will forever be Amy with the basket
Looking pretty
on
hardcore.
Rio Grande. Yeah. Not to say that I've never pushed a basket in when I was homeless, of course, right? But that one wasn't mine, and the only thing that ran through my head in that moment was, if you don't do something different, this is the last picture your kids will ever see of you.
This is your legacy.
Right. What
a horrible legacy.
I couldn't imagine that being the last reference that my children had of me, and that was it. So I went into jail, I was arrested.
And with today's technology, if they would do a search for you, that would always come up.
Always, yeah.
Oh, so you go into jail. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
It'd be like, this was the last picture we have of our mom.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, terrible.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, I've already put them through enough, right? I couldn't have that be who their mother was. So when they arrested me, I had such a distrust of the criminal justice system.
Sure.
The 6 times prior when I was asking for help, the jail would tell me, your criminal history is not extensive enough to qualify you for substance use treatment.
Oh, jeez.
So I already thought, well, what's the point, right? You're not going to help me. I'm not a criminal enough for you to get help, or worth it enough for you to invest money in, right? I have a substance use disorder. You scraped me off the street, 2 overdoses, but I've got to go commit more crimes to get the help that I need.
Wow.
What
a horrible message.
It was horrible. But this last time when they offered me treatment, I almost didn't take it, because of that distrust that I had, right? Like, you're not going to help me. You don't care about me, But for some reason, I just decided to take it. I met with Noella Sudbury, who's actually my boss now today. She was my LDA in jail, and they really sat me down, and they really gave me my options. And they gave me the very last bed at House of Hope, and I jumped. And here we are, 6 years later.
Wow. And so you only went through one treatment center.
One treatment center.
Which is unusual for people with a substance use disorder.
Yeah. Now, but you got to remember, I was 37 years old when I went into treatment, right? I didn't have 10 years of substance use history. I think that's super important for a lot of people to understand is, I was fully emotionally developed, had a career, had a normal life. I had a 2-year breakdown that I had to overcome. I didn't have 10 years of childhood trauma. I didn't have 10 years of substance use disorder.
Right.
You know, and so for me, I mean, the one time worked for me, you know.
So you think there's a difference in terms of how long people have been living like that?
Oh, I personally think so. You know, there may be other people that disagree with me, but I personally think so. I mean, 10 years of trauma, 10 years of feeling like you're not worth it, or 10 years of substance use disorder and you're stopping your emotional development, I absolutely feel that has something to come into play, right?
Especially for people who are heavily using before that magic age of 25, when your brain supposedly is fully developed.
Yeah.
You know, so, and your brain was, for whatever extent it is, fully developed.
Yeah.
I'm joking. So, and you'd had a taste of a, quote, normal life too.
Yeah.
So that probably made a difference.
I knew how to function in society. I had success. I had a house. I had a family, right? Like I knew how to be a contributing member to society prior to my addiction, right?
So you go through House of Hope successfully.
I did 4 months.
What happens after that? Because, and we'll get to where you are now, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 4 months in House of Hope, residential. I did 2 months of outpatient within their program, and then I did 2 months of sober living. And this was all thanks to the funding from Operation Rio Grande, right? They did the whole wraparound services when they got that funding. And then I was approved for a housing voucher, so I got my own apartment after I moved out of sober living. And I was still going to outpatient when I moved out, and I started working for the Haven Residential Treatment Center, and I was just support staff, $9 an hour,
Right.
you know, taking a bus from 80th South all the way down to South Temple, you know, and would go to treatment, would go to work, and I did that for the first 6 months of my recovery. And then from Haven, I went to VOA Detox. So I worked at the men's facility detox, and that was amazing. I mean, I think that's what really solidified my drive to want to stay in recovery, was showing up at a ground zero level.
Yeah.
I mean, it really tested me, you know, being 8 months sober. It really tested where my commitment was.
And VOA does a great job, but it is a very rugged facility to either visit or work in.
Yeah.
Or stay in, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's right in your face.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and it's exactly where you were 8 months ago, you know. And so I worked there for almost 2 years, and then went to USARA and worked in their ARCHES team, so their addiction recovery crisis team. So I would deploy to the hospitals 24/7, and we would meet people where they're at, right there in the emergency rooms, and went from there to STEPS, from STEPS to Odyssey, and then
House.
Odyssey to naloxone, and from Utah naloxone to where I'm at now. So I've been all over the scope. Yeah.
And that's why I called you a superstar as well, because if you think about everything you just described, you're giving back, which gives back to you as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, and it puts accountability into place for me too, you know. Being able to show up the way other people showed up for me is what changed me, is what enrolled me into school, right? I never thought that I could ever have achieved the life that I have today, and it was only because somebody was willing to give me a piece of themselves and show up for me in a way that I have never experienced before. That's what was so powerful for me, that you don't know me, you don't need to care about me,
Right.
but you're showing up for me, right? That changed my soul forever, you know?
I can imagine, because you were coming from feeling really worthless standpoint to somebody really caring for you and really helping you.
Right? With no benefit to them. You know?
Well, that's true. They don't
Yeah.
get a commission for saving addicts.
You know? Yeah.
That's a good point. So, I remember, because I had the privilege of working with you for a while at Odyssey. And when you took off, we were deeply disappointed.
It was sad.
And we still miss you to this day. But the organization that you're at now, it's pretty ironic who your boss is, which is the woman you just mentioned, right?
Yes.
Noella Sudbury. So she actually was one of the first people to show compassion to you when you were at your worst.
Yes.
And now you're working with her in an amazing organization. Describe what you guys do now.
So I work with Rasa Legal. We are a public benefit corporation law firm.
That's RASA.
RASA, yes.
Does it stand for something?
It means it's Latin for erase.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So it's, to erase your record. So Noella Sudbury, extremely passionate attorney, right? She's had a lot of success as an attorney throughout her career.
Cool person, too.
Amazing woman. Amazing woman. And she worked with Ben McAdams when he was mayor for Operation Rio Grande. So that's how I met her in the jails. She became part of that project. And I've worked with her on just many different projects throughout the last, 6 years in behavioral health. And she is the attorney responsible for passing the Utah Clean Slate Law. So they passed the Utah Clean Slate Law back in February of 21. Was it
20.
1? I think it was 1. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Noella, I should know that.
Yeah.
But for all of those that don't know, the Clean Slate Law automatically expunges minor criminal misdemeanor offenses. So as long as you've met the time frame under the statute, it will just automatically be expunged without you having to go through the lengthy process of expungement. I have been through 3 expungements total on my misdemeanor substance use charges. That was a barrier for my housing. That was a barrier for background checks. That it's just a forever life sentence, and it's a misdemeanor possession charge, and I will forever have to be living with a record as a criminal, right?
And it's so unfair because at the point that you're trying to get your life back, all of these stumbling blocks are thrown at you.
Right.
Because it's like if anyone's ever filled out a job form, any criminal past, and then you're faced with either saying no and lying, and then when they catch you, you don't get hired,
Right.
or saying yes and you don't get hired, and the same thing with like applying for an apartment, and so everything, when you're climbing up in life and out of the lifestyle that you were in, is costing you more money than you can afford,
Right.
and throwing more barriers there. And a lot of people, I've talked to, and you have too, they just say, screw it.
Oh.
I wanted to get clean, I wanted to do the right thing, but there's so many roadblocks, I'll just start using again.
Well, you take away any chance of them getting any self-sufficiency, right?
Right.
But stay sober.
Yeah,
Randall.
right.
Stay sober.
Even though all this crap is being thrown at you. Yeah.
It's just beyond my comprehension as to how they think that rehabilitation's just being sober. It's so far beyond just
Right.
being sober, right? You need to be able to take care of yourself, your family, break those generational curses, be able to show up for your children. And how are they supposed to do that? The criminal record, they can't even volunteer at their children's school to
I
take
hadn't
them
even thought about that.
to take them on a field trip. But yeah, we're supposed to be active in our children's life and just flourish and grow, but we're putting all these barriers in the way. So Noella took it upon herself to, one, pass the law, and then she went beyond that. She saw, like, this only covers misdemeanor records. What about the people with felonies? What about the people who have charges that need attorney representation? How are they ever going to move past this? So she's like, we need to do something more. So we started RASA, and we offer low-cost expungement services. So we do 402 reductions to take people out of felony status. So sometimes their record's so extensive that they can't expunge because of the way the statute's set up, the way the law's set up in Utah. You have to fit the perfect box in their formula. You can only have so many felonies, so many Class A's, so many Class B's to be eligible for expungement. If you have too many, you're not eligible. You got to go for a pardon, right? Or you've got to spend a fortune to reduce down to fit the formula. Right? Bring a
Okay.
felony down to an A, bring an A down to a B, just so I have the right number of offenses and classes to make me eligible. So she's like, we got to do something more. So we do $250 402 reductions. We're literally charging $166 per case
Wow.
for expungement. So we do 3 expungements for $500. And
What would it have been before RASA?
I spent $3,000 on my first expungement, and I did 9 charges.
Wow.
And then you've got government fees on top of that, right? So we have government fees that we've been fighting in legislation for 2 years now.
Government fees, like what?
So you have to pay a $65 application fee to the Bureau of Criminal Identification just to get the certificate of eligibility to file with the courts. You cannot file an expungement without that BCI certificate. So that's $65. And then you have a $150 court filing fee per case to just file it in the court. So if you've got 9 cases, 9 times 150,
Sure.
plus the $65 application fee, plus the $65 certificate for each case that you have to purchase to file the case. So you've got 3 different government fees on top of any attorney fees, and so the process is so extensive. You know, you have to relive your background, you have to relive your trauma, you have to face all of your past again to try to get past it, and then you've got to figure out a way on a $9 an hour income to pay the $3,000 to move on with your life.
Wow.
But stay sober, Randall.
Yeah, well.
Right?
Yeah. Boy, that's a grim picture. And you guys have you've cut the cost massively.
Huge.
And simplified the procedure, right? So people the other thing, you know, what you just described to me, because I've never, knock on wood, I've never had a criminal record. It's a very complicated process for somebody to maneuver through all this crap.
It is. It's very extensive, very time-consuming, very complex process for people to go through, you know. And so we wanted to take all of that stress out. Like, we will handle it all for you. All we need from you is for you to complete a BCI application, and we'll take it from there.
Wow.
We will represent you. We will file for you. We will do it all for you. And it has been so transformative in so many lives. I mean, across the scale of individuals, right? Not just people early in recovery. I'm talking to clients who are 70 years old that want their record clear out of sheer principle, to finally never be burdened and by that stigma, by that judgment of having a criminal record. They have been successful, they have maintained careers, they have moved past that barrier, but out of sheer principle want that off of their record because it doesn't reflect the person that they are today. Right? You don't realize how heavy it is and how long you've been carrying it until you're finally free from it. I mean, just tears on the phone, grown men, from the relief of never having to be that person anymore.
Are you free?
I am. I've cleared my entire record.
Really?
Yes.
And you have a big smile on your face when you say that.
It was huge. It was a barrier for me to go to school. I can't get licensed in the state of Utah without having to go through an extensive process to become a therapist. I'm finishing up my master's right now. I had to meet with the associate dean at the University of Utah just to be accepted into the MSW program on misdemeanor possession charges. I mean, just something that simple. I can't go give back to the community that I love so much and show up in the behavioral health space because I had a possession charge 6 years ago, and then I've got to have a meeting with you to tell you why I should be able to be eligible to finish this program. It's those type of barriers that just keep pushing people down.
And it's so unfair, and you are, you're such a great example. I mean, you go 6 years ago, that was you. 6 years into the future, this is you now. And you shouldn't have to deal with the crap that you went through because 6 years ago you screwed up.
Yeah.
And you were dealing with a disease.
Yeah.
You know, if you'd had cancer, you wouldn't have had to worry about. I mean, people don't seem to understand that addiction is a disease, and people deal with it in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
And so your disease took over your life 6 years ago, and now you are doing wonderful things.
Oh, thank you.
You know, boy, How many people have you helped? Has RASA helped and Clean Slate helped?
I mean, I'm coming up on 2,000 expungement petitions that I've drawn personally, that I have drafted personally. You know, we have...
In the period of what?
In 2 years, almost 2 years. In February, it will be 2 years that we've been in business. But right now, we've got almost 4,000 open cases right now.
Jeez.
And that's just Utah. We will be expanding to Arizona on December 6th. So Noella's goal and mission is to take this nationwide.
Why not? Are other states, do other states treat people with a criminal history the same way we do?
We're starting to see some progress in other states. We're starting to see some movement, but not at the extent of what Noella's doing, right? Like, I just don't think, I mean, she's just that woman that if anybody can do it, she's going to do it.
Oh, I
and
believe
she
that.
leads with such a passion and a purpose, and she does it for the right reasons, right? She didn't enter in this to make a name for herself. She did this because she saw the barriers within the system, having been right in the middle of it when she did Rio Grande, and she's like, we need to change it, and she took her position as an attorney, and she took on that mission upon herself, which has been just so inspiring to be a part of.
She is an inspirational person. So are you.
Well, thank you. So are you.
Well, thanks. I mean, we're all in recovery and happy that we are. And like I said, I was lucky I didn't have to deal with the criminal record.
Yeah.
But still, just staying in recovery for a long time really makes a huge difference in somebody's life. And you are the best example of that. And why people should not judge somebody for what they did 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, people can change. You know? So, thank you very much for that. See everyone why I called her a recovery superstar. You are.
Oh, I've only made it this far with individuals like you surrounding me. It has taken an entire tribe.
You are a wonderful person. Thank you very much, Amy,
Thank you
for being here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I do as well. And thank you. We appreciate you either watching or listening to another podcast of Odyssey House Journals.